Hey guys, Michelle here with a weekly question for you all. So, the question that I got this week was from someone who was asking me, is it okay if I communicate with my partner over text or email about something that I'm upset with them about? More or less, when I have something that I want to say to my partner, is it okay for me to say it in that way instead of telling them to their face? So, this is a really good question to ask, and one that I think is very common. I know I've been there. I've definitely had moments in my past relationships where I just was hesitant to say something in person to my partner, so I said it over text instead. So it's really easy to fall into that. I think most people have at one time or another. So what I'm going to do in today's video is I'm basically going to walk through kind of the pros and cons of this. And then I'm going to have a couple suggestions at the end to try to think about if there's kind of a middle ground here, depending on why or what your reasons are for choosing to communicate with your partner in this way. So, to point out some of the benefits of this, right? One of the big benefits is that if you are feeling really nervous about talking to your partner about this thing that you have to say, there may be a part of you that feels or thinks to yourself, okay, either I could say absolutely nothing, or because I'm not feeling ready yet to say it to their face, I feel like saying it over text or email is like better than not saying anything at all. And there's something to be said for this. I mean, of course, it depends on your relationship and the topic that you're bringing up, if it's truly better to bring it up over email or text. But it is you practicing using your voice, being authentic, getting to a place where you're saying something. So for some people, that's just the avenue that they feel more comfortable with, is communicating, through writing, email, text message, messenger, whatever it may be. They feel more comfortable doing that than they do getting to the verbal communication, which can arguably be harder. The other big benefit of this is that when you're sending an email or sending a text, you can edit yourself, you can backspace, you can change things up and make sure that by the time you send it, you've proofread it and you're making sure that you're sending what you really feel. Sometimes, of course, when we're communicating verbally and we're having to just kind of be thinking more on our feet, sometimes we say things we wish we could take back. When we're communicating in writing, we can take it back before we press the send button. So that's another positive of it, is that it does give us a chance to edit ourselves, especially if you're one of those people who has a habit of maybe saying some things that you wish you weren't saying in the moment. When you communicate in writing, you may realize that it just feels, I guess, maybe more kind or just maybe more thought out than how you can get communicating verbally. Some of the drawbacks, though, I mean, the most obvious one is that there's a lot of missing information. You don't get to see each other's body language. You don't get to hear each other's tones of voice. There's just a lot that you're missing. I mean, again, I think we've all had that experience by this point with one person or another of a text getting misinterpreted. Yep. So there's a big risk that you're taking there, that things may get misinterpreted by communicating in this way. The other thing that's a big drawback is that there's probably going to be some lag time in between replies, especially if you're doing this when one or both of you is at work. It may come down to a situation where you're waiting hours for a response from them, and during that time things can really fester. You can really get in your head wondering what they're thinking or what they're going to say back, and that can make the conflict grow bigger just because you're not communicating in real time. So there are some risks, for lack of a better way to put it, in choosing to communicate in this way. So why do people do it then, right? Again, this is common to fall into this. So there's typically two reasons, and for each reason that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give a suggestion. So the first reason is simply that people maybe don't have the time to sit down together in person and talk it through. Especially if you're a couple where you're not living with one another yet. You guys may only see each other, perhaps once during the week and then have to wait till the weekends. And something major may come up and you just may not feel good about like holding on to it and waiting for a couple days before you can say something. And you may have this thought of, I'd rather say it to them in an email than, just have to wait and get in my head thinking about all this. It's not that I'm afraid to say it to them. I just don't want to wait to say it to them. So if that's the situation that you find yourself in, one thing that would be good for you and your partner to talk about is to name that, right? To name that you guys sometimes go days without seeing each other. And if something comes up that each of you wants to say to the other, to decide if you guys are okay with getting that across via text or email. But then if you guys do decide, yeah, if something's on your mind, sure, send me an email about it. That's great. Then what I've had a lot of couples do is they then decide that when they do see each other in person next, they're going to talk about it. It's not just going to be that they hash it out over email and then they act like it never happened when they're together. They make an intentional choice that yes, we can and will communicate about things via text or email if we need to, but then we're going to talk about it verbally. And I highly suggest that, to circle back around when you guys are actually together and just see if there are any loose ends that need to be wrapped up with this conflict or topic or whatever it was that you guys were discussing. That's what I would suggest for you guys. Talk about it first, in writing in some way, but then come back to it when you are in person together. Now, there may be some of you, though, who are in a different boat, which, again, when I've done this in the past, this has been the boat that I've been in, which is that I could have very well talked about it verbally with my partner. I could have gone home and seen them that night and talked about it with them. I chose to communicate in writing because I felt too scared to say it. Just straight up. I felt nervous about it. I wasn't feeling confident in myself with starting the conversation. It felt just easier to do it over text, even though I could have done it verbally. So if that's the category that you fall under, I would encourage you guys to try this and see how it works for you. So the first is to get your thoughts out in writing. Send an email to yourself, journal about it, get your thoughts out, because probably why you're feeling scared and nervous going into this is just because you're worried about trying to just, again, like think on your feet, that kind of an idea, and say what you want to say in the way that you really want to say it. If you write it down, it's a good way to kind of do some of that legwork and think through it before the conversation. So put it down in writing. And then when you are with your partner, you can say something to them like, hey, I have something that I'd like to talk to you about. I'm feeling a little nervous bringing this up. I wrote some thoughts down. Is it okay if I read it to you? And hopefully your partner will say, sure. And then you can go ahead and read your thoughts. And then you and your partner can have a back and forth dialogue in real time about their thoughts on it. You can say more that maybe you didn't get a chance to say in writing. And then you guys are having this actual verbal conversation about it. But you also had a chance to kind of hopefully calm your nerves by writing something down. Again, especially as someone who feels more comfortable communicating in writing, there's something that feels very calming about that for me personally. When I know that I've written it down, I have something to read from, it just makes me feel a little more prepared if I'm going into a difficult conversation. So try that out for yourself if you tend to just communicate more in writing out of fear of doing it verbally, and see how that feels as a way to find a middle ground. So that's what I have for you guys for today. If you have a question, send me an email, nextchapter.michelle@gmail.com, and I'll be back here next week with another one. Thanks. Bye.